Hey there, fellows. So right here we've got our pause, which is a favorite of ours at this point. But as of right now, it's just sitting there, with it not having an engine and so on. Anyway, so this idea occurred to us. Now, what if we were to place the driver's seat where it's gonna be once we build everything up the way we want? Because you see, the factory placement of the driver's seat, its default position is not what we're looking for. So we're going to be moving it back. Then we have to tailor the steering system accordingly, as in relocate the steering column to match where the seat is going to be. We're also going to have to upgrade the brakes, and generally get this bus to a point where it's able to move under its own power. Once it's able to do that, we'll be able to take this thing out for a drive, figure out its steering, handling, and braking capabilities, work out what needs to be done with the suspension, the brakes, the steering system. But before it's able to move at least slowly, all of that's going to be impossible to determine. Let's get this thing to move at a leisurely pace and see what's up. Let's do this. Coming at you with some new merch, fellas. You would have noticed that we're constantly adding new stuff to our lineup, which already includes a bunch of different t-shirts. You can get yourself a baseball cap with a flat brim or with a bendy one. And now we've also added these sweet t-shirts that say "enough talk, let's do this," which is a catchphrase of mine that you hear pretty often. Then you've got this one that depicts a motorcycle engine, so that's pretty cool. Plus, don't forget that we offer personalized mugs, which we'll send anywhere in the world. This one is leaving the country, as a matter of fact. Plus, we've got a new iteration of our document holder. As you can see, you've got a red logo instead of a white one, and you can have it just say Garage 54 instead of showing your license plate. So yeah, it can just say Garage 54. There you go, fellas. You'll find a link in the description. Hit that, head on over and grab yourself something. Drift bus build, testing with a Lada motor. Sorry for the slightly sick voice. BMI Russian doing the translation and voiceover as always. So here's where the build is at so far. We've cleared a bunch of stuff out, cut out the wheel arches. And right now we're looking around and trying to work out where the driver is gonna sit. We reckon the driver's seat has to be located somewhere in that area. Same goes for the steering column and all of the associated components. Looks like we're gonna have to wing it. So we'll place the seat, drive around. Right, so we'll be positioning all of the controls around that spot right there. I mean, it seems easy enough when you're throwing ideas around, like let's do it this way or that way. But things are always way more complicated when it comes to practice. So we're going to be working stuff out as we go here. But we'll get the job done. It's not like we have an option. Time to carry on. Okay, fellas, so we've extracted the front axle, taken that apart. As for why we even went there, well, I did say that we need this thing to steer, and turning them wheels was actually really tough. We didn't really understand why, but once we got everything out and started dismantling, it turns out that on the right, which is always the side that's under the most stress on a bus, I mean in terms of potholes and puddles, that is where they usually are. So you've got water there all the time. Anyway, so look at this. We knocked out the kingpin, and this is what used to be a bearing. I wouldn't say you're wrong if you were to say that it looked like a bearing. But condition-wise, it is dry in there. So they weren't keeping it lubed. What are these? The balls? Anyway, so it's all rusty to the point that during the teardown... So when the knuckle was the only thing being held in by that kingpin, we tried everything to get it to move, but we were unable to. And so we had to tear this apart. And now we're gonna head to the parts shop, buy all of this stuff new, give it a clean, throw it all back together. and give it a good helping of some lube to make sure that it turns with minimal effort. Since, as you can imagine, once we make this thing fast, and able to drift of course, given that's the original plan. Now if we just leave the steering system like this, the driver might need an assistant to help him turn the wheel. Remember those old vehicles with no power steering? Like those old ZIL trucks, for example. Some of those old cars legit required 2 people to steer them. Now that's a no-go for us, given we'll have just 1 driver. The rest are gonna be passengers, and as not to terrify them, steering the bus needs to be an easy thing to do. Which is why we need to give the steering system an overhaul. Make it steerable with 1 finger. Okay, it's time to head for the shop and buy everything. I'll show you the receipts a bit later. As for the axle itself, we'll leave the old one in there for now. So this entire area is naturally getting much lighter, given we are ripping out anything we don't need, and there is still a lot more we can do. Like this sort of leaf spring definitely won't do it for us, given that it's too big and too stiff. And we are going to be slamming this beast. I mean, there's no way this is going to be a proper drift machine on stock ride height. It has to be lowered. We actually need to make quite a few tweaks to the suspension. I mean, if you were to take any Lada or BMW perhaps, there's a lot going on there, like casters and Ackermans, and that sort of adjustability requires running trick suspension links. We will of course try setting all of that up here, but we've yet to see whether we can make all of that work. That'll have to wait until future installments when we get to the suspension tuning. But for now, there's the matter of fixing the steering knuckle. Let's rock. Here's where we're at with the pause build, fellas. It's all quite interesting, actually. The motor is sitting in there quite nicely. We've got the gearbox connected to the prop shaft. Wasn't too hard. And the driver's seat is located right here. You've got the pedal box here as well. Now, the factory pneumatic brake system needed to be converted to hydraulics. Thing is that when all of that was dismantled, we tried working the brake mechanism just with our bare hands. And you know what? Everything is great. The pads are doing their thing. This has got a new set of pads, by the way. So what we ended up doing was welding in a bracket and installing a clutch slave cylinder. And so now when you press the brake pedal, the cylinder brings them brake pads apart, and the wheel decelerates. So that aspect we covered, and everything works just fine. The next problem we had to deal with after the brakes was the steering system. This box is from a Mercedes minivan, a B100 if I remember correctly. So that's in, but it needs to be complemented with a pump. And so we've got a Japanese unit which we've mounted onto that Lada engine. We made a pulley, put a belt around it, and all of this should work at 107% capacity now. The box is German, the pump is Japanese. You've got quite some length here. We had a high-pressure hydraulic line made for us at a local shop, and it's all good. Now we just need to finish assembly, throw in a steering column, and a wheel, of course. Right now we are considering whether we just leave the factory pause bits, or go get something completely different. I did actually measure the stock steering wheel. Maybe we just go with it? It's not as gigantic as on a trolley bus, though it is still a bit oversized. Anyway, so now we figure out how to go about that, and immediately after, it is on to the first test drive. On a Lada engine, yo! Curious to see if it's even able to set off. Here's what's interesting though. I just tried using the pulley to rotate the engine, and the bus actually moved. So even a tap wrench can exert enough force to get this thing moving. Surely the engine has enough torque to get it going. Okay then, let's finish assembling this mess and head out for our very first test drive. Let's do this. Okay, I am in the seat and ready for action. So we're about to start the engine and try setting off. Good luck to us. Try not to hit anything. They are lacking. Right, fellas, we're experiencing some slight problems. So the first time I set off, the brakes weren't quite there. That prompted us to relocate the cylinders, and now the brakes work. We also had a problem with the power steering. Have a look at the tensioner we've got going for it. It's one of those. We actually fitted a ratchet strap. What matters is it gets the job done. But when we start the Lada motor and let it sit at idle, I turn the steering wheel, which of course puts a bit of load onto the power steering pump. Point is that the Lada engine is really unhappy with that. It stalls and that's that. Meaning I have to keep the revs up and keep my foot on the gas pedal. But no biggie. It is definitely something that you can easily get used to. Okay, it's time to open the gate and go outside. The clutch is on its way out. We are out of engine. Doesn't have enough power. We are on our way. Let's go. You know, I feel as if that wasn't even first gear, but instead like third. Why is it so quick? Holy cow. Why would you need to go this fast? Strange. Very strange indeed. Must be down to the final drive ratio. It should have gotten up easily. But it didn't. Curious to know why. So we have failed miserably. All of that smoke is coming from the clutch. Yeah, we've got the same effect in first gear. In a Lada, it would not be going this fast in first. It'd be way slower. Isn't that interesting? This has to be down to the final drive. I see. I really wanted to drive up a hill, but it is barely moving on a flat surface. What a story. What do we do now? Okay, fellas, so after I've been out for a drive, don't mind the cooling fan whirring down there. I am not ready to switch it off yet. We really have to let it cool down first. It got really hot. We've still got smoke coming from the clutch. Yeah, given how much this vehicle weighs, a stock Lada clutch is definitely inadequate. Not to mention the engine is underpowered. What's really interesting is that we did look into the ratios. The final drive we've got back there in the diff. But for whatever reason, in first gear, it was barely even able to budge. I mean, it was very hesitant to pick up any speed. And when I dumped the clutch and began to accelerate, I started to hear some detonating noises coming from the engine. That'll go away once we adjust the ignition. But you see, to get the revs up high enough for the engine to run somewhat stably, you have to get up to a speed that'd be third gear in a Lada. Like, seriously. So in this episode, we basically just decided to have a bit of fun. Try and see how this thing drives on a Lada motor. So this didn't quite go the way we wanted it to, but no sweat. At the very least, now we know that a Lada motor has absolutely no place in here. So from here on out, it's going to be a lot of thinking, weight reduction. Yeah, weight reduction is something we're actively going to have to work on. The engine will need to be replaced, of course, though I'm not prepared to tell you what we're going to be using at the moment, since I still don't know myself. At the end of the day, it was able to drive on a Lada engine, with tons of smoke and overheating, yes, but it was moving. And there's your first test drive. That is how they usually go down, so... And that's all I have for you fellas. Watch us, subscribe, send in your comments and suggestions, give us a big thumbs up, tell us what motor we should use. I honestly have no idea. I'd catch you guys later.